Hi everybody, welcome to the Bookworm 2 channel. Everyone always asks, what happened to Bookworm 1? Well, let's just say that soul departed a long time ago. Okay, Harry and Meghan, let's get that out of the way. I'm utterly bored by them and I find them cheap, common and utterly disgusting. Why people are still accommodating them is just beyond me. But then there are also people who believe that Donald J. Trump also meant to portray himself as a doctor and not Jesus. Right, like you've ever seen a doctor clad in robes with glowing hands. But never mind, moving on. I wrote an article on that on Substack, so you can go read my opinion on the Donald J. Trump saga, religion and politics there, if you wish. It is brand new. I posted it an hour or two ago. Anyway, I'm well aware of the despicable visit to Bondi Beach. I am aware that Meghan merged the clothing she wore while meeting with families of victims or who were victims themselves. That is, of course, disgusting. I always tell people that to understand a narrative, it is best to place yourself in a similar, situation. Imagine yourself spending time picking clothes to wear to a funeral, not with the deceased in mind or the deceased's family, but with your mind fully tuned in as to whether the clothing will sell well. Okay, now tell me, did you feel any empathy for the deceased or the family in that particular moment? Of course not. Your mind was on the possibility of a sale or sales, and you were calculating your commission. However, much worse than that was Meghan's face while a woman was talking to her about the event. The overacting, the excessive fluttering of the eyelashes, and the terrible hangdog sad sack wrinkling of the forehead. It is so fake, so disgusting, that I could not bear looking at her again. She, Meghan Markle, is a disgusting human being, and I do not even feel bad by saying it. She oozes bad and fake and, like the Queen said, evil. Yes, I know she spent less than 2 hours Friday night at the event where people spent well over $2,000, nearly $3,000 to see her and listen to her. Nowhere did they say she would only be there for such a short period of time. I'm almost sure the women thought they were sort of going to spend a girls' weekend with Meghan. I also hear that some people certainly did not know that Meghan will only be there for a few hours, and did not know that Meghan's talk and the photographs were actually Friday night. Well, actually more late Friday afternoon, and that some of them missed it. I hear some people are indeed fuming. Well, I hope they sue the organizers. Somewhere, someone must draw the line. It would be grand if someone sues for false advertising. Well, at least some of them got what they deserved. On their walk in Sydney, no one even looked or really reacted. There were very few people around. And it was even worse when they arrived in Sydney. There was absolutely no one but a handful of paparazzi. And did you hear that Buckingham Palace slipped up in a press release and basically acknowledged that they had a hand in this money-making scam tour? Allegedly, William is fuming. There are people saying they have never, ever seen him like this. Oh, well, then, William, use your anger productively and do something. What? I don't know. Maybe William should hire a ghostwriter. Look, I know you won't do that, but There must be something he can do. Okay, we went through all of that very quickly. So here is the coup de grace. Did you see Markus Anderson sitting next to Meghan Markle at the rugby? Now, I immediately thought, aha, yet another grift, another money-making event, you know. But I was wrong. So wrong. The new Soho House in Australia is only opening in the fourth quarter of this year. So it wasn't that. It had nothing to do with Soho House at all. No. Listen to this from the horse's mouth. Markus accompanied Meghan to support her at the Girls' Weekend event in Sydney. He helped connect her with event co-host Gemma O'Neill. It has now been stated that Markus has always been close to Meghan, but that he now also, here it comes, that he now also serves as a close advisor for her professional, charitable, and personal endeavors. I'm not going to comment on that, really, but even Marie Claire now attributes him with the role of PR consigliere. Please note that consigliere is an Italian word and it refers to someone who serves as an advisor or counselor to the leader of a criminal organization like the mafia. So here is the brutal truth. It now appears that unknown fiscal sponsor is now paying Markus Anderson as well, and of course paying for his flight, and who knows whatever else, his meals, I don't know. The new fiscal sponsor and administrator for Archewell Philanthropies is indeed still a secret and could remain so forever, or until Meghan throws a toy out of the cot again and refuses to be managed. Unless, of course, Archewell was placed under administration via a court order, of which I must admit there is indeed no trace whatsoever. Here is what I know. The move from a standalone 501c3 to a fiscal sponsorship is a very significant structural shift. Not the casual, oh, by the way kind of thing Meghan made it out to be. In a fiscal sponsorship, Archewell would be a project under the legal and tax-exempt umbrella of an established non-profit, namely then the sponsor. Now, it could be that the fact that Archewell was briefly labelled delinquent in 2024 played a role. The delinquency was largely due to missing paperwork and fees. By moving to a fiscal sponsorship, Archewell actually offloads that burden of state-by-state registration and IRS filings to a professional entity. Standalone entities like Archewell Foundation must file a Form 990 or 990, which is a public document listing high-level donors, executive salaries, and grant amounts. Remember, we could see how much they were paying James Holt, and we actually spoke about that. Well, that is because of that Form 990. Okay. Now, fiscal sponsors file a single Form 990 for all their projects, of which Archewell will indeed then be one, which makes it much harder for the public to isolate Archewell's specific financials. Now, financial administration usually implies a court-ordered or regulatory takeover due to insolvency or gross mismanagement. We checked rather thoroughly, and there is no public evidence that Archewell was indeed forced into this by a court. However, we cannot set aside that it could have been a voluntary administrative outsourcing because of the 2024 delinquency notice and its declining revenue. I mean, we are talking about dropping from 13 million in income in 2021 to 2 million in 2022, which was indeed likely the reason why Archewell had to do this in order to stay in business. Although the rebranding to Archewell Philanthropies was public, the specific fiscal is often not named, and indeed not in this particular case either. Technically, when looking at registered entities who provide these types of services, we can look at Silicon Valley Community Foundation, SVCF, who had previously handled big transfers to Archewell Foundation, i.e. the 10 million one we spoke about for Archewell that year, when their donations were indeed 13 million. They got one donation of 10 million and a couple of smaller ones which made up the 3 million. Well, that 10 million was transferred to Archewell Foundation by SVCF. However, it was not them, or shall I say, it is not them. They are not the fiscal sponsor. They themselves actually said so. I'm told that they are just as baffled and feel that they need to know before transacting any more money to Archewell. And I can understand that. One would want to know who is behind the facade. What if it's a criminal entity? I'm not saying it is, but what if? I mean, we don't know. Anyway, so as far as I know, SVCF still do not know. And then there are Mission Edge or Global Impact, also providing these services. So, my friends, unless the sponsor goes ahead and itemizes Archewell's activities, it is quite possible that we may never know. Now, Charity Watch had commented on Archewell before, and Charity Watch this time has severely criticized this particular move by Meghan and Harry. They also called Archewell's impact reports marketing material and not financial documents. So far, I have indeed been unable to track and find out who the fiscal sponsor could possibly be, and there will also not be a hope in hell to do so until the end of this financial year, the 2026 financial year. And even then, it is unlikely that Archewell's activities would be itemized. And even if they do, how would we know where to go look? As for me, I am going to keep an eye on the King's Trust USA, regardless of the fact that the goody two-shoes financial gurus are saying that the legal subordination and financial transparency between the two, namely Archewell and the King's Trust, would likely be unacceptable to both parties, and that, my friends, made me laugh until I wet my pants. I know they did not mean it that way, but they basically now told us that both are shady in their financial dealings and that both wouldn't like transparency. So yes, like things like paying Markus Anderson for being in a threesome with Meghan and Harry. And guys, you can take that any way you want. Next time I want to tell you another story about Markus Anderson. But until then, please take good care of yourselves and stay safe. Bye.